You may have seen the Twitter account The Nox Event in real time, which, as you can imagine, recounts the story of the Nox Event in, well, real time. Just called me Captain Obvious. This was a chance for the Indie Stone, creators of Project Zomboid, to flesh out their world and story building. Zomboid has a very hands-off story, leaving a lot to interpretation, which I think is great. The whole idea is that the government tried to prevent panic and keep everything secret, which I'll theorise about in a moment. Everything we know and learn is from the perspective of someone inside the event, which begins around July 1st, 1993. But wait, I hear you cry. The game starts on the 9th, and the first tweet is on the 6th. Well, my dear friend, while the first information we get is from the 6th of July tweet, outlining the first quarantine, we get anecdotal evidence from the Nox Talk radio show on the 10th, where a caller explains that their phone line has been out for 9 days. This is a recurring theme, so I think we can surmise that something was going on around this time. So back to our first day, before the game starts, July 6th. The military sets up road blockades around Knox County, which is a real place, but not accurate to the game. The zone encompasses Muldra, West Point, and the entire map south of the curve of the Ohio River. Importantly, this means Louisville is not yet in the zone. More on this later. More importantly, I don't believe that the quarantine is entirely fenced off. Only roads are blocked and patrols, which, referencing a report from WBLN News. Richard, you've attempted to enter the exclusion zone? I did, Diane, and I didn't get far. We went cross-country in his pickup, but there were barriers everywhere, lots of perimeter patrols. We were picked up pretty much instantly. I was in cells overnight. I think it's likely that they wouldn't have tried to get in the zone if it was entirely fenced off. So we've established the first thing to happen, but that alludes to far more. Remember that the phones were cut 5 days prior to this. They knew about this well before the game starts. So what's the origin? Well, they would never tell us. We will never know. It would ruin the illusion. It's much better to leave people guessing. There are 3 main theories. The secret lab. Out in the woods of Rosewood, there's a secret military base. There are rumours about this place and its secrecy, and is one of the leading theories as to where the infection started. While likely, the only real evidence is from a Nox Talk radio caller who is a janitor at the lab, but this could be the lab in Louisville. Although it wouldn't make sense, since the infection didn't start there. Spiffo's bad burger meat. This theory is popular, but only really is a meme. It's a funny idea that the game's mascot is to blame, but the only real evidence for this is a single anecdote from what is probably a conspiracy nutjob on the Nox Talk radio.
That new Spiffos restaurant just opened. It's in the meat. They've been feeding cattle to cattle. It's a European thing. There was a guy talking about it on Triple N. Guy wrote a book. You eat burgers and it gets to your brain. My son worked in Spiffos before they let him go. You know how many he cooked a day? A lot. A whole lot. That's all I'm saying.
Chemical testing. Another likely conspiracy theory, but one that gains more traction in the game. News hosts often mention this during their Stay Tuned spiel, as well as in an interview with the retired Lieutenant General Jim Deacon and Professor John Ramirez. Also, the political ads. He said he'd clean up. He said the toxins discovered in our fields and forests would be eradicated. He failed. Meteor or extraterrestrial event. Early on, there are mentions of meteor storms and thunderstorms, enough to warrant a tweet on both. This could just be world building. There are multiple advert and irrelevant tweets. But it's too much of a coincidence. In-game, the meteors are mentioned once offhand, and once by a Nox Talk caller, saying, "It's in the air we breathe." It's all very Stalker-esque. Speaking of breathing, one of the main recurring themes is the smell.
You can smell it in the air. Something smells bad for weeks.
God, the smell in here. Don't come to the hospitals.
Some were saying it was a smell. Awful bad smell here.
This doesn't really point anywhere, other than that, once again, this has been going on at least a week before the start of the game. Retanara thinks that the smell originates from a horde, which would explain the intense reaction and secrecy from the military. Others think that the smell is how the infection is transmitted, although the infection isn't reported to go airborne until the 15th. There are a few anecdotes claiming it to have been planned. It's not entirely far-fetched, with the military lab and the swift reaction by the military, and cutting the phone lines well before the quarantine.
I just want to say this was planned. All those helicopters, all those soldiers just appearing. My boy was in Desert Storm. I know it can't be done in days. To move those guys that quickly, they knew a storm was brewing. They knew this might happen. Why spin us this bullshit? Who in hell are they protecting? I'll tell you, themselves.
There is also a man who, upon returning home from work, on the night of the quarantine, states, "Get taken aside, they shine a light in my eyes, and they take a blood sample. Keep me locked tight. Then they say I'm clear, kick me out." Once the world has fallen, leaflets issued to the immune start coming from inside the zone. We'll get in depth with this at the end. There's also a few pieces of evidence pointing towards dogs being involved.
I took my dog out of the car and I just ran. They shot my dog. What kind of soldiers do that?
Dog's been sick. So glad she's with me. Regardless of how it started, by the 6th of July, people were publicly getting sick with a fever. But is that so severe to warrant a physical quarantine of an entire county? There is definitely foul play afoot. So, setting aside how and why it started, let's get into the timeline. A lot of this has to be taken with a grain of salt. It's purposefully ambiguous. And also, the timeline and continuity isn't perfect. So this is my interpretation of all the information, adjusting for errors. We've already established that around the 1st of July, the phone lines inside the zone were cut, but not as far as Louisville. 6th of July. The military quarantines Knox County, which encompasses the entire map south of the bend in the Ohio River. Residents are turned away at gunpoint. Personnel in hazmat gear are seen within the zone. Air activity increases. Residents turned away make their way north to Louisville. 7th of July. Knox Telecommunications provides no comment on phone line outages. Fort Knox and Fort Campbell cancel military personnel leave. Kentucky Governor Cal Fairweather claims he is in the dark, like everyone else, regarding rumours of illness inside the exclusion zone. The White House denies the president's early return from G7 summit in Tokyo is related to the Knox situation. 8th of July. Reports of mild sickness spreading among some left inside the zone. Interestingly, this is one day before the game begins, and the default settings by day 1 have the apocalypse in full swing. Obviously the game isn't finished, and the start will have a lot of changes before then. But I find it interesting to theorise how much happens between the 8th and the 9th, and that residents inside the zone, only now, 2 days after the quarantine started, have started hearing about the infection. White House representatives allude to a security event or localised contamination. More military personnel arrive. No-fly zone established. July 9th is the day the game starts. At this point, there isn't much information about what's happening. There are only rumours. No questions have been answered at this point, and speculation is rife. Okay, I've changed this bit a dozen times. Multiple reports give conflicting information. One of the first reports states that sufferers fall unconscious and then regain motor functions and are confused, dazed and nauseous, or as we know, zombies. But the other sources suggest that sufferers become ill with nausea, fever and hallucination before reanimation. Perhaps there are two ways to interpret this. Given that the phone lines were cut 8 days ago, I think it's likely that the zone is overrun with zombies. For a long time, I thought that there weren't many zombies or people who weren't reanimated yet, but I think that's just my headcanon. The military have been dealing with this for 8 days and quarantined an entire county. Things must be serious by this point. Civilian radios are the only real form of communication for those who have them, and they spread fear and concern, but only 2 civilian broadcasts occur in-game. Neither of them mention any form of illness, supporting the idea that things haven't really kicked off yet. It's uncertain how far the infection has spread by this point, as it's likely the military quarantined far beyond the reaches of the known infection in order to contain it, but it's likely that via a handful of still healthy carriers that it spread throughout the zone already, and beyond. Gunshots are heard within the exclusion zone, close to the perimeter. This is most likely people trying to escape getting warning shots. General John Regrew, commander of the Knox Zone event, is the first person to break the silence. He appeals for calm and confirms a sickness in the zone.
I can confirm there has been an outbreak. The ailment is, as yet, unidentified. It is flu-like, it leads to panic, it leads to confusion. There is no evidence of fatalities within the exclusion zone. We are using judged and judicious force to maintain the border. Warning shots have been fired. No civilians have been harmed. We must ensure that this infection is not allowed to spread. I am in hourly contact with the President on this matter. The no-fly zone will remain in place for the foreseeable future.
News channels report on people turned away by the military, being cut off from family, and the lack of communication. NNR radio reports,
"The Knox event outbreak is localized. It is an influenza-like disease that renders the afflicted unconscious. After a period of illness, sufferers regain motor functions. They are, however, dazed and confused, panicked and nauseous. It's in this state, we are told, that military scientists are finding them. The infection is widespread in the zone, and how it spreads is unknown."
NNR radio also report violence between those suffering with the infection. The president makes the following speech.
This is a distressing time.
The situation in Kentucky is unexpected.
Insanity. My first thoughts are with the friends and families of those within the zone. People have been separated. Folk have been evacuated. I understand the difficulties facing us. However, I have
The faith in the fine people of the Center
for disease and control to get to the root of the panic and confusion within the exclusion zone.
I have faith in our servicemen and women to fulfill their duties, and for General John McGrew to command them with the foresight and dedication he has shown throughout his exemplary career. It is a distressing time, America. But you are in safe hands. Thank you.
LBMW, Kentucky Radio, reports soldiers due to be sent overseas are redeployed to the zone. They report that influenza-like symptoms brought West Point and Muldrow to a standstill. Then the blockade appeared. They also mention boats patrolling the Ohio River, calling the zone watertight. One caller gives their experience. You were one of the last out of the zone, am I right?
I was. My mom's still in there.
Have you heard from her?
Nah, phones are out. These guys all standing between us.
The army, yes. And how did you get out?
Well, we heard the helicopters all night through. Mom was ill. High temperature. Real sleepy. Nothing serious, I thought. I was going to work, I guess, and go early, like every morning. I saw these guys in plastic suits, bright yellow.
Hazard suits?
I guess. Anyway, I saw them down the road. Thought it was weird, but everything's weird at 4 a.m., right? Then I drive through, get taken aside. They shine a light into my eyes, take a blood sample, keep me locked tight till 10 minutes ago. Then they say I'm clear and kick me out.
Triple N reports that it's been 48 hours since it all began. A recurring character, Judge Matt Haas, makes his first statements.
So what is it? I'm no scientist. I didn't listen in class. Too busy on the football field. We know folks are ill. We know it's widespread. We know no one could get out while the soldiers rolled on in. We know they're back on their feet. But we also know there's confusion. I'd be confused too, but they've got scientists to talk to now. Guys in chemical suits. They've got the best in the business, heck, the world, in there to fix this whole thing up. So let's support our boys, people. This thing, let's call it the Knox event. Feels like a powdered keg. Too many people shouting conspiracy, hearing unverified gunshots. No situation is perfect, people. This is a war on whatever this thing is. And together, it is a war the United States will win.
Triple N also interview many of the displaced people turned away from the outside border. A WBLN reporter who attempted to enter the zone yesterday is released after being captured by the military and kept in a cell overnight. Judge Matt Haas reports again.
I've met General John McGrew many times. He is a fine man. When he says there have been no fatalities from the infection, he means it. That man's career has earned enough medals to block the noonday sun. He's no liar. This precautionary exclusion zone is there to protect us. I'm sorry for the people inside. Truly, I am. Running a fever, feeling confused, being trapped. But this is clearly in the nation's interest, the greater good. I've heard a lot of people asking, why can't we know? Why can't the government just say, here's the problem? There's bravery in silence, folks. They're busy looking in on this. They don't have time to look back out. They're relying on us to keep calm and have faith. I do have faith, and as an American, so should you.
10th of July. A military professor claims transmission of the illness has slowed. The international community makes its first statements, with the UK Prime Minister criticising the near complete lack of clarity. National unrest grows as protesters propose a march on the White House, before being cancelled due to arrests. A Knox Talk radio caller claims that the event was planned. Another caller confirms phone lines have been out for 9 days. A conspiracy theorist claims it's Spiffos burgers, which have been allegedly responsible for the previous rally outbreak, something akin to mad cow's disease. NNR Radio, with former CDC chief scientist, has this to say.
This is what happens. Year after year, cut after cut, department after department shut down. This sort of inefficiency, this lack of respect. America is not ready for this. We have not been ready for a long time. We all know which administration is to blame. I won't spell it out. We are reliant on men with tanks rolling out and sitting on roads. You don't solve problems like this by pointing a gun.
LBMW interviews military professor John Ramirez. How are they doing in there?
Not good, Jackie. They're all on 2 feet, but they're in a bad way.
What are the symptoms? Is this life-threatening?
We've taken samples. There's a team looking into that right now. There's no reason to spread fear or alarm. We have top men looking into what this is, and just where it came from.
And the symptoms?
Like we said, flu-like at first, and then panic and confusion. We think the spread has slowed now, but we don't deal in absolutes. This remains a volatile situation with a contagious illness at its heart. The lockdown is required by international law and common sense. Until we know for sure, we're safe.
sure y'all can understand why.
And the reports of violence?
At this point in time, we have no reason to believe folks won't recover.
Riots reported in Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles. Triple N reports on those displaced by the quarantine. Some have been taken to Louisville, while others have set up tents on the boundary. They report that General John McGrew has apologized for the lack of clarity, that the outbreak is contained and fatalities are currently not a concern. More reports that
There is no reason to believe folks won't recover.
reports on the riots turning violent, with a firebomb being thrown during a broadcast. Judge Matt Haas addresses the public again, appealing for calm.
We need to thank the U.S. Army. Whatever this is, it isn't fun. It could have spread. Right now, you could be sick. Your kids could be sick. They were ready for their duty. They got involved. They rode out from their bases and they protected America. They did it fast and they did it effectively.
WBLN reports further on the violent riots. Civilian radio channel transmits concerns of people dying in the zone, and that infected are changed somehow.
Hello? I'm in the exclusion zone. You're being lied to. The Army knows exactly what this is. It's a disease that people aren't people anymore.
11th of July. The President addresses the public outrage and riots.
I understand the frustration. I can hear you loud and clear. I understand the frustration because I'm like you. I want to know when my fellow Americans who are laid low with sickness can be returned to their families. To this end, I will be talking to the General and the CDC today, from which I will be able to provide more answers. However, the horrifying activities we have seen on our streets over the last 24 hours, there is no excuse whatsoever. Arrests will be made. Every authority is on high alert. If you are seeking to disrupt our way of life through fear and scaremongering, you will be sorely disappointed. I will come back to you with more information, full information, when I have it in my hand.
Panic buying and shortages of goods throughout the US. Judge Matt Haas addresses the public again.
Just stop it, people. Stop this insanity. You think setting the world alight's gonna give you an answer? If you want to stockpile food, fine. It's your right. You want to buy guns? I'm sitting on an ammo dump here. You want to open fire on officials on a New York street? Get the hell out of my country.
The European Union advises member states to close internal and external borders, followed by the World Health Organization advising all non-military and medical flights to be grounded. Stock markets plunge worldwide as a result. The President of the United States responds to the World Health Organization advice.
This move is as unwelcome as it is economically unsound. I will seek to redress this move at every opportunity. After talks with the General, I am satisfied that the Knox event is for all intents and purposes contained. However, tests on those recovering from the Knox sickness are inconclusive. We have labs set up inside the zone now. I assure the American people that every dollar I have at my disposal will go towards their healing and rehabilitation. However, I repeat, the Knox event is contained. Procedures are under...
2 hours later, at 7:30 p.m, the Knox exclusion zone boundary is widened. A Knox Talk radio caller reports tanks in the streets of Louisville and gridlock as people flee north. A quick side note, we don't get much information on where the zone expands to, only that it expands to the outskirts of Louisville, where we see the only military checkpoint currently in the game. Hopefully we'll see remnants of the old boundary in a future update, maybe on the West Point Bridge? Riots sweep the nation. Military are called in to assist the police. July 12th. A transmission is broadcast on an unknown frequency, likely heard by nobody.
Hello? Hello? I'm in the exclusion zone. You're being lied to. The Army knows exactly what this is. It's a disease that people aren't people anymore. At first it came from a fever. Anyone could get it. People died really quickly and it happened. Now they get their teeth into you, you're one of them, and we can't get out. They got snipers, they don't ask questions. But making that kind of noise attracts the dead. There are so many here, and so quickly.
Early in the morning, a civilian radio transmits the following.
I've seen a picture. Maybe you have too. It's from West Point, taken a few days ago, I guess. The film got out, got processed. There's this guy, blood round his mouth, arm hanging on by a thread, still walking. Still walking in this street full of corpses. We know the truth now. The truth is pure hell. We know we're being lied to.
WBLN interviews former CDC chief Jack Galbraith again, who said,
"We're very clearly being left in the dark. We could buy the silence for a few days, but now they don't want to risk more riots. But those people are not going to get better."
NNR radio gives more reports of riots, police and protesters clashing. First fatalities from unrest are confirmed. One interviewee gives his account on the widening barriers.
They came when it got dark, threw me and my boy in a truck. Said, "It's for our safety." I said, "Safety from what?" I heard rumors y'all won't believe. I heard people trying to escape from the inside. They want us away from there. Those army boys are scared. You can see it in the eyes.
Triple N reports troops and tanks in Times Square and on Miami Beach. WBLN reports military presence in Central Park, downtown LA, Miami Beach and more. The president releases a statement.
It is time to face the facts. It is time to settle down. We only ask for your responsible actions as an American citizen. I, personally, take the responsibility for the perceived lack of communication and for the rumor mongering that has grown around the so-called Knox event. At this time, we have no reason to believe residents of Kentucky will not recover. However, as the picture clears and more information is made available, its likelihood is starting to recede. We have been hesitant to discuss specifics, yes, but with reason. The Knox event is contained, but its panic and confusion are not. We wanted to establish facts, but public alarm has not provided enough time. From 6 p.m. tonight, there will be curfews in some of our biggest cities. This is for your protection. Please do not leave your house. Please have faith in both our military and our emergency services.
Knox Talk radio callers begin to report deaths. One caller reports,
They're lying to us. We were on the inside. My mom, she was attacked. This guy bit her. We tried to get out, but they took her. I don't know where she is. I took my dog out the car and I just ran. They shot my dog. What kind of soldiers do that? And I'm sat here in this camp on some guy's car phone. The others, they want me to get the word out. People in there have changed. They try to kill you. All of them try to kill you.
An image from West Point, inside the zone, makes its way to the public eye. The image shows a young man, dismembered but still living, in a street full of dead bodies. All news outlets rush to cover the photo. The man being described as covered in bite marks or wounds inflicted by a bladed weapon, standing apparently unharmed, and his arm unattached. Judge Matt Haas addresses the public again.
Yes, I saw the pictures. We got the facts. Horrifying pictures handed to Triple N reveal brutality inside the exclusion zone. We can't show the image, but at least one person suffering from the infection has attacked another viciously. We should have been told this was happening. One fact remains. This event has stopped in its tracks. You may not agree with the Army's decisions, but their actions speak for themselves.
July 13th. There are a few radio transmissions on the night of the 12th and the morning of the 13th. These transmissions are likely caused by radio jamming by the military. Perhaps once the photo got leaked, they tried to cover up more from coming out. I think this because the transmissions seem to be coming from different channels that they're actually transmitting on. For instance, WBLN looks like a Hits FM transmission, although after this, they seem to transmit on the correct channels, but by then, the cat's out of the bag. Survivors from inside the zone begin to emerge, some who were held in quarantine by the military. Where have you been, Joe?
The military base inside Knox.
Who? Who kept you there?
The army, McGrew's men. They said it was a quarantine. Then one day we woke up, the doors were unlocked, the soldiers were gone, but in the main dorm, in the hall, blood and changed people.
What don't they want us to know, Joe?
What you already do know. Like in the photos, the first sickness, it killed, but it didn't kill enough.
What you're saying can't be real.
They got sick, they went crazy, then died. Then they went for my fucking throat. Sorry for the language.
That's okay, Joe. Is it contained? Are you safe here with us?
That much is true. The people who changed, they're trapped behind the event line.
Is everyone infected?
I think so. I think they all got it. We were lucky.
Another caller from inside on Knox Talk Radio.
I was in there. Everyone got the sickness at once, but not everyone got the sickness. There was a bunch of us running for the North Road. All around us, they were waking up dead. We saw soldiers in hazard suits. They just threw us into trucks. There was this one lady. They just shot her. Back then, we didn't know why, but now I know they did her a favor. They kept us in a military camp. They called it quarantine. When people got sick, they took them away. For tests, they said, through an inch of hazard suit plastic. They never came back. I didn't know anyone I was with, but fathers, daughters, wives, children, losing their families one by one. Then, 2 days ago, we woke up and the cells were open. Soldiers were gone. No trace. Just some guy in a uniform who'd been filled with bullets. Looked like a disagreement. We went north, walked right through the border. No one said a word.
A civilian radio broadcast goes as follows.
Okay, people, I need you to listen up right now. They're shooting anyone that goes to leave. There's no checks. They don't examine you for any infection. They shout a warning, then you get a bullet. I'm in a camp just south of the river. We don't know where to go. Why the hell didn't I just run?
Reports start streaming in from all news sources of the worsening condition inside the event. The international community issues a joint statement through the United Nations, denouncing a complete lack of clarity over details of the Knox event.
You're listening to Hits FM.
It's Knox Hits. It's Frankie. Oh god, I'm not good at this. If you haven't heard, just turn to a news channel. Everyone inside is dead. Everyone. I'm gonna puke. Someone else do this.
What the hell are you doing? We're live. You can't
Look like I care. You told me to stay here. If anything happens, it's on you.
The Vatican orders all visitors to evacuate and the city to be closed. Curfews announced for Chicago, San Diego, Baltimore. Saudi Arabia announces Mecca to be evacuated and secured. LBMW's border camp reports.
This might be LBMW's last broadcast from the Knox event journalist camp. We can confirm the infection is now spread through fluid exchange, namely bites from carriers. We have been encouraged to keep this true from our listeners. We will endeavour to keep broadcasting on this wavelength.
WBLN broadcasts a live speech from the General.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending tonight. I only ask for orderly and responsible journalism. I've requested that this broadcast play on all media channels embedded within my troops. First and foremost, we are safe. America is safe. Today, we can confirm that, yes, the nature of the Knox event is degenerative. It causes panic and confusion among sufferers, some of whom will then perform acts that are un-American. The initial period of contagion is over. There is absolutely no need for further panic. Panic engendered by irresponsible and unofficial reporting. Sufferers are not deceased. We are establishing the likelihood of discovering a cure. At this stage, the infection is passed only through direct fluid contact. This means bites, scratches. My thoughts are with those poor souls behind the event line, but this is contained. It has always been contained. We are safe. America is safe. Thank you.
July 14th. A few hours after midnight, the President is seen leaving the White House amidst angry crowds. General John McGrew's speech is repeated on many channels. A Triple N report from inside the zone is broadcast live.
I can't say how, but we've been allowed access. We're through the event line. This is an exclusive. Once upon a time, people pumped gas here. Now it's eerie. It's quiet. It's desolate. And we're not alone. Just around the corner is a woman. A woman who used to work here. Her mind's a blank, and she's angry. But her leg is injured, so we're safe. She's stationary. This might shock some viewers. Did those noises just come from the camp?
Oh, fuck! Oh, God! Oh, God! Jesus!
A protest at the inside border checkpoint, most likely the main Louisville checkpoint, results in the shooting of 2 unarmed individuals. Violence breaks out between those trapped, many armed, and the military. There are numerous casualties, mostly civilian. Triple N reports.
The President has demanded calm.
Fellow Americans, we must have peace. Please, tonight, stay in your homes. Mistakes have been made, I know. But at this point, the Knox event is contained. The world is watching us. We don't have to panic. The curfew is there for a reason, and I would ask you to stick by it. We intend to make deliberate action within the exclusion zone very soon.
we've lost contact with our reporter Kirsty Cormack, but we have incoming reports of gunfire and civilian casualties at the Knox border camp.
WBLN reports.
Diane, can you hear me? Are you seeing this? Some images might be shocking, Diane. People are dead here. There was a disturbance. A soldier opened fire. There are multiple casualties. Tear gas! Move back, people. You are safe. The infection is contained. I want that camera shut off now. There is no need for panic. The Knox event is contained. It is always being contained.
Overnight, the situation deteriorates.
Folks, we're going straight over to Richard Gerswin. I've been attacked. Bitten. This huge wave of... They're dead. There's no other way to say it. We were being held by the army for filming the guns. They were killing people. The dead people from the inside. They heard the fighting. There were thousands of them. They're stone cold. One of them, they're dead. They're actually dead. It's a war zone. Oh God, there's more! The Knox event has been compromised! Compromised! I've been separated from my colleague, Frank Hemingway. There's gunfire on the other side of camp. Frank, can you hear me? We're live. We're live on air. Jackie, there's been an incursion. There's hundreds of them. They're everywhere. They came from every side. Frank, what are they? What do they look like? Get off me!
July 15th. The military begin pulling back north towards the Louisville Bridge. Jackie J, the only reporter surviving the checkpoint incident, reports.
This is Jackie J. It's been the night from hell at the Louisville border camp. Violence between the military and civilian groups broke out and it attracted them. Hundreds of people with the Knox event infection. Maybe more. Maybe thousands. They came in, through the wire, through the barricades. They attacked. I don't know what happens next.
Some localized success by bands of armed citizens and deserter soldiers defying evacuation order in fighting small groups of the infected. WBLN reports that thousands of people are fleeing north, many of them injured. They suspect the military are pulling back to form a new perimeter. They later report mobs descending on those who show symptoms of the infection. They tell of rumours that the military intend to shut off the Louisville Bridge. All channels report on the border incident and of the mass of people moving towards Louisville. Triple N report the first known case of someone showing symptoms of the Knox infection without fluid contact from the infected. NNR gives a grim report.
There are people here who have had no contact with the infected. They're running fevers, they're incapacitated. Without urgent medical attention, many will soon die. Medical attention right now is yet to arrive. The Knox infection is spreading without fluid contact. We repeat, the Knox infection is spreading without fluid contact.
WBLN reports that the Knox event infection is sweeping through Louisville. The illness has struck potentially thousands of people down. Instances of reanimation are not yet active within the city limits. However, scenes on the road from the event zone suggest it is inevitable. Judge Matt Haas gives his advice.
We've had word from our reporter on the ground in Kentucky. It's spreading without bites. Get away from your television, now. Lock the door, get into the basement. No one knows how it's happening, but it is. Keep away from people, animals, everything. Purify water, turn off electrics, hide. It could be coming from anything, anywhere, and anyone. Go get your guns, people. Disassemble them, clean them, then reassemble. Lock them, load them, keep them that way. The founders of this beautiful nation gave us the right to bear arms. Liberals have tried to take that right away for years. I've sat behind this desk so many times explaining the obvious. Well, who's glad they've been at the range now, huh? Protect yourself and protect your future. This is it. We're ready. God bless. Good luck.
There is no new word from the president or military. Large groups of infected continue to travel north to the noise of Louisville. Jackie J, trapped in the former checkpoint, continues reporting, urging people to leave Louisville. She repeats the notion that people are becoming infected without contact. NNR reports gridlock inside Louisville city limits, huge queues for gas stations, and a surge of people heading for the bridge to Ohio. Cases of the infection are alluded to. One instance being a seemingly sleeping infant waking only to attack its mother. At least 95% of the boundary camp survivors and military personnel are ill. Some have already crossed the Ohio Bridge. A Knox Talk radio caller tells of a soldier shooting her asymptomatic father before shooting himself. July 16th. All channels report that the infection is now airborne. They look to the government, to the president for hope. His location is unknown. Reports of hospitals full of the incapacitated. Jackie J, still trapped inside the now derelict checkpoint, continues to report on the spread before she begins showing signs of the infection. A Nox Talk caller reports barriers on the bridge. Hundreds are killed as the military blow bridges across the Ohio River. A civilian broadcast tells of the Nox event infection being reported in the United Kingdom and Africa. Another Nox Talk caller from the hospital tells of everyone hallucinating and moaning on the floor. Perhaps this person is immune given the proximity to so many infected. The British Queen elects to stay behind in Windsor Castle as the royal family evacuates. Official reports on Triple N, LBMW and NNR confirm the infection has reached Norfolk, England and Mogadishu, Somalia. Jackie J makes her last report from the checkpoint. Her last words: "Keep safe, Kentucky." Judge Matt Haas gives his last report on Triple N.
What is a body without a soul? Impurities aren't tempered, urges aren't controlled. It's just hunger and anger. Maybe I'm reading into them too much. Maybe they're just a blank, savagery without a thought, murder on automatic, the embodiment of death. Welcome to hell, America.
17th of July. Multiple networks make their last transmissions. The Nox event is confirmed in Cincinnati and Columbus, Ohio, Newcastle and London, England, Seoul, South Korea, Okinawa, Japan. A pre-recorded message from General John McGrew is released and repeated on multiple networks.
This is addressed to those unaffected by the second wave of the Nox infection. You might know who you are by now. If you don't, you will in coming days. The disease will not spread to you as it has to others, but through fluid contact, by which I mean bites, it surely will. The time has come to bear arms against this threat. They may be your family, they may be your friends. Do not hesitate to pull the trigger. These are dark days, but as a nation, we can and will prevail. You have not been forgotten. We will come for you. General John McGrew.
Confirmed cases in New York and Chicago. July 18th. Cases confirmed in New Orleans, Los Angeles, Berlin. A set of broadcasts from the checkpoint where Jackie J transmitted by a man called Jonas Underwood. He and a group from Louisville set up inside the checkpoint and broadcast, urging people not to go to Louisville. He reports,
More people have come by saying they're going to Louisville. Do not go to Louisville. They had a printout. Said soldiers checked them for bites. Stuck a gun to their head and gave them a sheet of paper. This is what it says.
The leaflet in question repeats General John McGrew's last transmission. He broadcasts for almost 2 days before the final broadcast. The checkpoint is overrun. Sometime around now, civilian broadcasts out of Nashville, Tennessee begin transmitting.
This is Hal, broadcasting out of Nashville. I'm going to broadcast every night at this time. We're protected here. Fortifications. Guns. There's a hell of a lot of dead people outside, but we're safe. If you can get here, we have food and beds. You'll just need to find a way to distract the horde that's at our gates. That'd be one hell of a favor anyway. Friendlies only. You can trust us, but be aware that we will not trust you. Not for a while.
He continues to repeat similar messages every day for about 5 days, the final transmission being,
We're starting to fill up, people. We've taken a vote, and soon we will raise the drawbridge. It's a democracy over here still. If you're immune and you want in, you come now.
The transmissions abruptly stop. A transmission from NNR.
My name is Pastor James Hartnell. I am in what was once a place for radio broadcast. It is now a mausoleum, a walking mausoleum. I have been bitten. I am not long for this world. I came here to this room to pray with you for our souls. Our Father, who art... Oh, but here they come. Do not worry, I am ready for this. Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
3 days later, transmissions from National Base resume.
This is Zach broadcasting. We just took over a fortification at the Air National Guard base. It's close to Nashville, right by the airport. I'm going to broadcast every night from now on. The group who were here got overrun.
Oh shit, they're here.
They're gone now, and so are the dead. We've rebuilt the fortifications. We have guns. We have food. We need fresh blood. We need survivors. Come as soon as you can. Friendlies only. No guns.
This group likely killed and ate the previous occupants, as they are labelled in the game files as cannibals. The final transmissions are as follows.
This wavelength has been chosen for emergency broadcast. The spread of the Nox event infection is now total. Stay in small groups. Do not travel. Assume all major urban areas have been compromised. We are doing all we can to reclaim American soil. We will come for you. This broadcast will be set to repeat. All further updates will be broadcast on this frequency. Good luck.
The remaining information we have are all from the Nox event in real-time Twitter, which doesn't tell us much. Presumably from the perspective of a survivor listening to his radio inside the zone after America has fallen. They are incomplete and hard to interpret. July 18th. Belgium occupies Liege forts for the first time since the Second World War. Most American broadcasts cease, or are replaced with emergency broadcast. July 19th. New York attempts to secure Rikers Island. The Australian Prime Minister looks visibly ill during speech. North Korea destroys bridges and blocks roads linking it with South Korea and/or China. Something about Torrejon Air Base in Spain and refugees. Something about Maiden's Tower and likely a community of the immune. Something about Jazeera, Rhode Island, and Corsa. Russian government leaves Moscow for Mount Yamantau. July 20th. Seikan Tunnel, Japan, is destroyed by unknown. Thousands trapped. South Korea destroys Hangang Bridge. Angeles Port? Massive damage, not sure. July 21st. Thailand government attempt to evacuate via helicopter to Bubbing Palace. Their fate is unknown? It's hard to tell. Neuschwanstein Castle falls to the Nox infection. Intense fighting in the vicinity of the Castle of the Moors. July 22nd. Willenau Palace is set on fire. The Twitter events were kinda lame, not gonna lie. It feels like the devs were just naming cool places. I get that it's world building from the in-game character's perspective, but it doesn't really do anything other than name places and governments. We can safely assume that the world has fallen and a bunch of communities of immune have cropped up. One thing I noticed after poring through the radios and Twitter for hours was the evidence that it was all planned. I find it interesting that the final transmissions from the Louisville checkpoint talk about leaflets. It's clear that those coming from inside the zone were first checked by soldiers before being given the leaflet, which feels quite planned. It's likely that an organised and immune sect of the military banded together quickly and formulated a response, but they'd managed to do this in only a few days. We don't ever get numbers on how many are immune. It could be many, since so many fall to direct contact transmission. It could be interpreted as having been planned all along, but I think somewhere in between is most likely. I think that those first involved in the event, when the phone lines were cut almost 20 days ago, already had this scenario as a contingency. Not that they planned for it or expected it, but they certainly knew a lot more than the player or most of the characters and military know. I think this is why the resistance comes from inside the zone, and they were able to adapt so quickly. Wow, that was a lot. This script is pushing 10,000 words, and it's easily the most comprehensive thing I've ever written. Like I've mentioned, zomboid lore is purposefully ambiguous, and not great continuity-wise. I've mashed things up a little bit to make it make sense. I hope that I've created a consumable version of the events that happen in the lore, since so much is repeated, and if I presented the entire radio logs word for word, well, we'd be looking at a 4-hour long video. I don't really even know how long this will be. Thanks again to all the patrons and channel members, Squatlock, Dominic and Gracia, Chaos, Harkness, and Shushgirl. And a special thanks to the Discord members who helped me record all this. Believe it or not, almost every shot in this video was the same 5 or so people. I just got them to move and mask them in multiple times. You can kinda see where I did that in some places. Yeah, I was lazy. And also thanks to Made in CCCP for the music.